A young mother lives on a snowy street with her sick baby until a millionaire sees something in him. The December wind cut through Evelyn Allen's threadbare coat like invisible knives as she huddled against the brick wall of Morrison's general store. In her arms, wrapped in every blanket she owned, 3-month-old Lily wheezed with each labored breath. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell in an irregular rhythm that made Evelyn's heart clench with terror she'd learned to swallow. Millfield, Vermont was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, which made being invisible both a curse and a necessity. Evelyn had perfected the art of disappearing into corners, of timing her movements to avoid familiar faces, of becoming just another shadow on snow-dusted streets. The townspeople had their own lives, their own problems. A 23-year-old woman living in her car with a sick baby was a complication they'd rather not see. "Just a little longer, sweet girl," Evelyn whispered against Lily's fevered forehead. The pharmacy wouldn't open for another hour. She'd counted her coins 3 times, barely enough for the generic cough syrup, nothing left for the antibiotics Dr. Chen had said Lily really needed. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, but desperation had become her constant companion. Her old Honda sat in the public parking lot 2 blocks away, windows fogged with condensation, the back seat transformed into a makeshift nursery. One more week until her next paycheck from cleaning the elementary school at night. One more week that felt like an eternity, when every breath Lily took sounded like paper tearing. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself remember, just for a moment, the girl she'd been before Jake's promises turned to ash, before the eviction notice, before she'd understood that love could be a weapon designed to destroy. Her parents in Colorado had made their position clear. She'd made her bed with that deadbeat. Now she could lie in it. The phone had gone dead 2 months after Lily was born, and Evelyn hadn't had the courage or the means to try calling again. A black Mercedes turned onto Main Street, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Unusual for Millfield, where pickup trucks and sensible sedans ruled the roads. Evelyn pressed herself flatter against the wall, instinct screaming at her to be smaller, less noticeable. But the car slowed, then stopped directly in front of where she stood. The driver's window descended with a quiet hum. "Are you all right?" The man's voice carried concern, not judgment. That alone made it foreign to Evelyn's ears. She should have said yes, should have smiled and waved him away. Instead, Lily chose that moment to let out a rattling cough that seemed to consume her entire small body, and Evelyn heard herself say, No, I'm really not." Henry Wright had left his estate at 4:30 that morning, driven by insomnia and memories he couldn't outrun. The sprawling property 15 miles outside Millfield had become a mausoleum to everything he'd lost. His wife Caroline 3 years ago to cancer, and with her, his belief that money could fix anything. The company he'd built, Wright Technologies, continued to thrive under his leadership, but success felt hollow when you returned each night to empty rooms that echoed. He'd driven into town without destination, seeking only movement, distraction, finding instead a young woman who looked like she was holding the weight of the world in her arms. Literally. "When did your daughter last see a doctor?" Henry asked, putting the car in park and stepping out. Up close, he could see the woman was younger than he'd first thought, with dark circles under hazel eyes that held a weariness beyond her years. "2 days ago, the clinic, they gave me a prescription, but She stopped, jaw clenching. "It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out." Henry looked at the baby, at the way the infant's skin had taken on a grayish pallor, even in the weak streetlight. He'd seen that look before in the final months of Caroline's illness, the body struggling against an enemy it couldn't defeat alone. "The hospital is 10 minutes away," he said, already moving toward the passenger door. "Let me drive you." "I don't even know you." But her protest was weak, fear for her child overriding stranger danger instincts. "My name is Henry Wright. I live in Millfield, and your daughter needs help that isn't going to come from standing on this street." He opened the passenger door, warm air from the car's interior spilling out like an invitation. "Please." Evelyn looked down at Lily, at her baby girl, whose lips were starting to take on a bluish tinge, and made a decision born of pure desperation. She slid into the passenger seat, cradling Lily against her chest, and whispered, "Evelyn, my name is Evelyn Allen, and this is Lily." Henry closed the door gently and returned to the driver's seat. As he pulled away from the curb, he noticed the way Evelyn's hands trembled, the way she held herself rigid, as if expecting at any moment to be thrown back out into the cold. He recognized the posture. He'd worn it himself in the months after Caroline's death, when kindness felt like a trap and trust seemed like the cruelest joke. "The emergency room. They'll want insurance information," Evelyn said quietly, staring straight ahead. I mean, I have Medicaid for Lily, but if they need more, they need to treat her. That's all that matters right now." Henry kept his voice even, non-threatening. "Everything else is just paperwork." The hospital appeared ahead, lit up like a beacon. Henry pulled up to the emergency entrance, and within moments they were inside, surrounded by fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaners. A nurse took one look at Lily and immediately called for a doctor. Evelyn tried to follow as they wheeled Lily away in a small crib, but a hand on her arm, Henry's hand, stopped her. "They need to examine her. You'll be able to see her soon." She turned on him then, and Henry saw something fierce in her eyes, something unbroken despite everything. "You don't understand. I can't lose her. She's all I have. She's everything." "I know," Henry said, and the truth of it resonated in his voice. He did know. He understood the terror of loving something more than your own life, of being powerless to protect it from the darkness. But right now, those doctors are fighting for her. Let them do their job. Evelyn collapsed into a waiting room chair, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion she'd been holding at bay through sheer will. Henry sat beside her, not touching, not speaking, just present, a stranger who'd stopped when the rest of the world had learned to look away. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Nurses came and went. Somewhere down the hall a baby cried, healthy lungs, strong voice. And Evelyn flinched at the sound of everything Lily wasn't. "Why did you stop?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "People walk past me every day. They see me. They just choose not to." Henry was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. 3 years ago, I thought I could buy my way out of any problem. I thought money was power, and power meant control. Then I watched my wife die slowly, and I learned that some battles can't be won with a checkbook. I learned what it feels like to be helpless. Evelyn turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time. She saw the expensive suit, yes, but also the shadows in his blue eyes that matched her own. She saw someone who understood that loss wasn't something you got over. It was something you learned to carry. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "So am I. For you, for Lily, for whatever brought you to that street corner." He met her gaze steadily. "But I'm not sorry I stopped, and I'm not going anywhere until we know she's going to be okay." A doctor emerged from the treatment area, and Evelyn leaped to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, smiled, and that smile was the most beautiful thing Evelyn had seen in months. "She's stable. Severe bronchiolitis, but we've started her on breathing treatments and antibiotics. She's going to need to stay for a few days, but she should make a full recovery." Evelyn's knees buckled, and Henry's hand was there again, steadying her, holding her up when her own strength failed. She let herself lean against him for just a moment, let herself accept the support of this stranger who'd appeared like an answer to prayers she'd been too afraid to speak aloud. "Can I see her?" Evelyn asked. "Of course. Follow me." As Evelyn moved toward the door, she glanced back at Henry. He nodded, understanding the unspoken question. "I'll be right here. Take your time." In the treatment room, Lily lay in a hospital crib, tiny oxygen cannula in her nose, but her breathing already easier, color returning to her cheeks. Evelyn reached through the bars and took her daughter's hand, that impossibly small hand, and let the tears finally come. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, half promise, half prayer. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay." Outside in the waiting room, Henry Wright sat and thought about the woman he'd found on a frozen street corner, about the baby fighting for breath, about the way one moment could change everything. He thought about Caroline, who'd always said that healing came from unexpected places, that sometimes you had to lose everything to find what really mattered. He didn't know yet that Evelyn Allen was about to change his life as profoundly as he was about to change hers. He didn't know that this chance encounter would become the hinge upon which both their futures would turn. All he knew was that when he'd seen that woman holding her child against the cold, something in his chest, something he'd thought had died with Caroline, had stirred back to life, something that felt dangerously like hope. Dawn broke over Millfield with the gentle insistence of winter light through hospital windows. Evelyn sat in the chair beside Lily's crib, her daughter's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb, the steady beep of monitors providing a rhythm that felt like a lullaby after the silence of fear. The nurses had assured her that Lily was responding well to treatment, that the worst had passed, but Evelyn couldn't quite let herself believe in good news. Experience had taught her that hope was often just a prelude to heartbreak. "Mrs. Allen," a hospital administrator stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, expression professional but not unkind. "I need to go over some paperwork with you regarding Lily's treatment." The Mrs. stung, a reminder of promises made and broken, but Evelyn let it slide. Of course. She followed the woman to a small office, leaving Lily under the watchful eye of a nurse. The administrator, her name tag read Patricia Morrison, settled behind a desk cluttered with forms and began typing on her computer. "Lily is covered under Medicaid, which is good. However, the extended stay and some of the medications we're using are considered specialist treatments. There will be some out-of-pocket costs." Patricia's fingers danced across the keyboard. "I'm seeing an estimated balance of around $3,000. The number hit Evelyn like a physical blow. $3,000. She barely had 300 to her name. Her cleaning job paid minimum wage, and most of that went to keeping gas in the Honda and buying formula and diapers. She'd been behind on her phone bill for 2 months, had started showering at the truck stop outside town because she couldn't afford a place with running water. I can make payments," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. "I have a job. It might take a while, but I'll pay every penny." Patricia's expression softened. "I believe you. Let me see what kind of payment plan we can work out." She turned back to her computer, then frowned. "That's odd. According to this, your account has been settled in full." "What? Someone named Henry Wright paid the entire balance this morning. The payment went through about an hour ago." Evelyn stood so quickly the chair scraped against the linoleum. No, that's not. He can't. I need you to reverse that payment." "Miss Allen, I can't just reverse a payment that's already been processed." But Evelyn was already out the door, moving through the hospital corridors with single-minded determination. She found Henry exactly where she'd left him, in the waiting room, 2 cups of coffee from the cafeteria sitting untouched on the table beside him. He looked up when she approached, and something in her expression made him rise to his feet. "You paid my bill." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You had no right." Henry's jaw tightened. "Your daughter needed treatment. The bill was in the way of you focusing on her recovery. I removed the obstacle." "I'm not your charity case." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, drawn from a well of pride that was all she had left. "I don't need you or anyone else swooping in to fix my problems. I was handling it." "Were you?" Henry's voice remained calm, but she heard the challenge in it. "How are you planning to handle it, Evelyn? By working yourself to death at that cleaning job? By choosing between feeding Lily and paying the hospital? By going back to sleeping in your car with a sick infant?" Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. "How did you—" "I saw the car seat in your Honda, the bags of clothes, the way you looked when I mentioned the hospital, like someone who'd been taught that asking for help was a sin." His expression gentled. "I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm trying to give you a chance to breathe. I don't want your pity." But even as she said it, Evelyn felt her anger deflating. leaving behind only exhaustion. I don't want anyone's pity. Good, because I'm not offering pity. I'm offering help. There's a difference. Henry picked up one of the coffee cups and held it out to her. Sit down, please. Let's talk like two adults who both know what it's like when life kicks you in the teeth. Against her better judgment, Evelyn took the coffee and sat. The warmth of the cup seeped into her cold hands. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been truly warm. Henry settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. I lost my wife 3 years ago, he said quietly. Caroline. She was everything to me. My best friend, my partner. The one who kept me human when the business threatened to swallow me whole. When she got sick, I threw everything at it. The best doctors, experimental treatments, specialists from around the world, none of it mattered. Cancer didn't care how much money I had. Evelyn listened, seeing the pain that still lingered in the tight lines around his mouth, the way his hands gripped his own coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. After she died, I kept working, buried myself in right technologies, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Built that big house on the hill because that's what successful people do, right? Fill the emptiness with things. He laughed, but it held no humor. I was miserable, successful and absolutely miserable, and I started to think that maybe this was it. Maybe this was all there was. Money and memories and slow decay. What changed? Evelyn asked, drawn in despite herself. This morning, you, Lily. Henry turned to look at her fully. I saw you standing there fighting for your daughter with nothing but sheer will, and I remembered what Caroline used to say, that money isn't for hoarding, it's for using, that the point of having resources is to share them with people who need them, that the only way to heal from loss is to prevent someone else from experiencing it, if you can. He set down his coffee and continued, I'm not trying to save you, Evelyn. You're already saving yourself. Anyone who's surviving what you're surviving is stronger than most people will ever have to be. But strength doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. It doesn't mean you can't accept help when it's offered freely, with no strings attached. There are always strings, Evelyn said, but her conviction wavered. Nobody does something for nothing. You're right, I do want something. Henry's honesty surprised her. I want to feel useful again. I want to believe that having money means something beyond quarterly reports and stock prices. I want to honor Caroline's memory by doing what she would have done, helping someone who needs it. So, yes, there are strings, but they're tied to me, not you. You don't owe me anything. Evelyn wanted to argue, to maintain the walls she'd built so carefully around her heart and her pride, but she was so tired. Tired of fighting alone, tired of pretending she had everything under control, tired of being strong every single moment of every single day. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. How to let someone help. I've been on my own for so long, and everyone who said they'd be there, they weren't. They left. They always leave. I'm not going anywhere, Henry said, and the certainty in his voice made her want to believe him. Not until you tell me to. And even then, I'll probably stick around and be annoying about it. The corner of Evelyn's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're serious. Completely. I've been told I'm excellent at being annoying. This time she did smile, small and fragile as new ice. The bill is paid. Let it be paid. Let that be one less thing crushing you. Henry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And while we're at it, let's talk about what happens when Lily is discharged. You can't take her back to that car, Evelyn. Not in December, not when she's recovering from respiratory illness. Panic fluttered in Evelyn's chest. I don't have anywhere else. I do. I have a house with more rooms than I know what to do with. Heating that works too well. And a housekeeper who'd probably love having a baby around. Mrs. Chen, no relation to the doctor, has been trying to get me to be more social for years. This would make her year. Okay? You're offering to let me stay in your house. Evelyn said it slowly, testing the words for trapdoors. A complete stranger and her baby. A woman who needs help and a child who deserves better than a backseat nursery, Henry corrected. And you're not a stranger anymore? You're someone I met on the worst day of your life, who didn't break, didn't give up, didn't stop fighting for what mattered. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Evelyn thought about Lily, about her daughter's labored breathing in the cold car, about waking up covered in frost because the heating had given out. She thought about pride and survival, about what she owed her daughter versus what she owed her own stubborn independence. "Just until I can save enough for a deposit on an apartment," she said finally. "Just until I get back on my feet, however long it takes. And I pay rent. Something. I won't be a freeloader." Henry considered this, recognizing it for what it was, a lifeline she was throwing to her own dignity. "Mrs. Chen's been after me to update the library. Old books need cataloging, organizing. If you're willing to help with that, we'll call it even." It wasn't even, not remotely, but Evelyn nodded. A job she could do while watching Lily, a way to contribute that didn't involve charity. Deal. They shook hands, and Evelyn felt the calluses on Henry's palm, not the soft hands of someone who'd never worked, but the hands of a man who'd built something with more than just money. There was strength there, and steadiness, and she found herself holding on just a moment longer than necessary. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Miss Allen, Lily's awake and asking for you." "Well, crying for you technically, but I'm pretty sure that's baby speak for where's Mom." Evelyn stood quickly, coffee forgotten. "I'm coming." She paused, looking back at Henry. "Thank you. For the bill, for the coffee, for stopping, for seeing me when everyone else looked away." "Thank you for letting me help," Henry replied. "For giving me a purpose beyond board meetings and empty rooms." As Evelyn hurried toward Lily's room, Henry watched her go and felt something unfamiliar blooming in his chest, not the desperate love he'd felt for Caroline, but something gentler, more tentative, the feeling of a life beginning to have meaning again, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, saving someone else might be the thing that saved him too. He didn't know yet that Evelyn Allen would become far more than a woman he'd helped on a winter morning. He didn't know that her strength would inspire him, that her daughter would make him believe in joy again, that together they would build something neither of them had thought possible. All he knew was that the sun was rising over Millfield, and for the first time in 3 years, he was glad to see it. The Wright estate sat on 15 acres of Vermont woodland, accessed by a private road that wound through snow-laden pines like a scene from a Christmas card. Evelyn clutched Lily closer as Henry's Mercedes navigated the curves, her earlier confidence wavering with each mile that separated them from the familiar streets of Millfield. The hospital had discharged Lily that afternoon with strict instructions for rest, humidity, and follow-up appointments, all things impossible to provide in a 2003 Honda Civic. "The house was Caroline's dream," Henry said, as they rounded the final bend and the estate came into view. "She designed every detail. I just wrote the checks." Evelyn's breath caught. The house was beautiful in a way that seemed almost aggressive. Stone and timber and glass, with enormous windows that promised views of the surrounding forest. It was the kind of place she'd seen in magazines while waiting in doctors' offices, the kind of home that belonged to other people, to lives she'd never imagined touching. "It's stunning," she managed, feeling suddenly very aware of her thrift store coat and the formula stain on her shoulder. "It's too big for one person," Henry said, and she heard the loneliness beneath the words. "Caroline wanted to fill it with children, with life. Instead, it's mostly just me and Mrs. Chen arguing about whether I eat enough vegetables." As if summoned by her name, the front door opened before they'd even parked. A small Asian woman in her 60s emerged, bundled in a cardigan, despite the heated house, her face lit with curiosity and something that looked like barely contained delight. "Mr. Wright, you didn't tell me we'd have guests." Mrs. Chen descended the front steps with surprising agility. "And a baby. Oh, let me see." Henry shot Evelyn an apologetic look as he helped her from the car. "Mrs. Chen, this is Evelyn Allen and her daughter Lily. They'll be staying with us for a while." "Evelyn, this is Mrs. Chen, who runs this household with an iron fist disguised as excellent cooking." "Flatterer." But Mrs. Chen's eyes sparkled as she peered at Lily, who was blinking sleepily from her nest of blankets. Precious thing. How old? 3 months, Evelyn said, instinctively protective, but finding something warm and safe in the older woman's open face. She's just getting over bronchiolitis, so she needs to rest. Then rest she shall have. I've already prepared the blue room. It has the best afternoon light, and it's right next to Mr. Wright's study, so you won't feel isolated in the west wing. The nursery is 2 doors down. I took the liberty of setting up a crib. We had it in storage from when— She stopped, glancing at Henry. From when we were planning, Henry finished quietly. It's perfect, Mrs. Chen. Thank you. Inside, the house was even more impressive. Soaring ceilings, hardwood floors that gleamed like honey, artwork that Evelyn suspected was original rather than prints. But what struck her most was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of contentment, but the heavy silence of rooms waiting to be filled with voices that never came. Mrs. Chen led them upstairs, chattering about meal schedules and where the linens were kept, but Evelyn barely heard her. She was too busy trying to reconcile this palace with the idea that she, Evelyn Allen, who'd been eating ramen for dinner and sleeping in her car, was supposed to live here, even temporarily. The blue room took her breath away. Large windows overlooked a forest, now painted in shades of sunset gold and winter grey. The bed was enormous, piled with pillows that looked like clouds. There was a sitting area with a fireplace, a bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in, and everywhere the subtle scent of cedar and something floral she couldn't name. Too much? Henry asked, watching her face. Way too much, Evelyn admitted. But Lily doesn't care about that, and right now she's all that matters. She looked at the bed with longing she couldn't hide. Although I might never leave that mattress. You shouldn't have to, Mrs. Chen said firmly. You look exhausted, dear. When did you last have a proper meal? The question should have embarrassed her. Instead, Evelyn found herself laughing, a sound rusty from disuse. I honestly can't remember. Well, that ends now. You settle in, feed that baby, and I'll bring up dinner. Mr. Wright, make yourself useful and show her where everything is. Mrs. Chen departed like a small, efficient hurricane, leaving Evelyn alone with Henry in a room that cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. The moment stretched between them, suddenly awkward now that the crisis had passed and reality was settling in. I feel like I should curtsy or something, Evelyn said, trying to lighten the mood. This is insane, Henry. This whole thing is insane. Sanity is overrated. He moved to the window, hands in his pockets. Look, I know this is overwhelming. I know you're probably thinking about bolting back to your car the first chance you get. But give it a few days. Let Lily recover in warmth and safety. Let yourself sleep without worrying about freezing or whether someone's going to knock on your window and tell you to move along. Just breathe for a minute. Evelyn wanted to argue, to maintain her independence, to prove she didn't need this. But Lily chose that moment to cough, a small, wet sound that sent fear shooting through her, and she remembered what was at stake. This wasn't about her pride. It was about her daughter's life. Okay, she said softly. A few days. Henry nodded, relief evident in the loosening of his shoulders. The nursery is just down the hall. There are monitors set up so you'll hear her if she wakes. Mrs. Chen stocked it with everything. Diapers, formula, clothes in various sizes, because she wasn't sure what you'd need. She did all that in one afternoon. She's been bored. I think she's thrilled to have a project that isn't force-feeding me vegetables. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get some rest, Evelyn. You're safe here. You both are. After he left, Evelyn stood in the center of the beautiful room and felt the weight of the past months finally catching up with her. The fear, the exhaustion, the relentless grind of survival. It all crashed over her like a wave, and she sank onto the bed with Lily still in her arms. What have we gotten ourselves into, baby girl? She whispered against Lily's downy head. This is temporary. We can't get used to this. We can't let ourselves believe it's real. But even as she said it, the softness of the bed beneath her, the warmth seeping into her bones, the simple absence of fear, It was already working its way past her defenses. Mrs. Chen returned with a tray laden with soup, fresh bread and tea that smelled like comfort itself. She set it on the bedside table and gave Evelyn a look that was equal parts stern and kind. Eat, rest. Tomorrow we'll sort out everything else. Tonight, you're just a mother with a sick baby and you're home. Understand? Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. Good girl. Mrs. Chen patted her shoulder and left, closing the door with a soft click. Alone again, Evelyn managed to eat half the soup before exhaustion won. She settled Lily in the crib in the nursery, a beautiful room done in soft yellows and greens, with a rocking chair by the window and a mobile of stars rotating slowly overhead. The monitors, Mrs. Chen mentioned, were indeed there, state-of-the-art devices that would alert her to Lily's slightest sound. Back in her own room, Evelyn peeled off her clothes, the same outfit she'd been wearing for 3 days, and stepped into the shower. The hot water was a revelation, washing away not just dirt, but layers of stress she'd been carrying for so long they'd become part of her skin. She stood under the spray until the water ran cold, then wrapped herself in a towel, so soft it felt like being hugged. There were pajamas in the dresser, new, with tags still on, in her size. Mrs. Chen's work, obviously. Evelyn put them on and climbed into the bed, sinking into mattress and pillows that seemed designed to catch falling people. Through the baby monitor, she could hear Lily's breathing, steady now, peaceful, the terrible wheeze finally gone. The sound was better than any lullaby. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself just for a moment imagine what it would be like if this was her life. If she was the kind of woman who belonged in houses like this, who didn't have to count pennies or choose between eating and keeping the heat on. If she was someone Henry Wright would want, not out of pity or charity, but because she was worth wanting. The fantasy was dangerous. She knew that. Every good thing in her life had been temporary, her parents' love conditional, Jake's promises empty, stability always just out of reach. This would be no different. Henry was being kind now, but kindness faded. It always did. And yet, as sleep finally claimed her, Evelyn found herself hoping, despite everything, despite experience and wisdom and all the lessons life had taught her, that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. In his study down the hall, Henry sat with a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking and thought about the woman sleeping in his guest room. She was nothing like Caroline. Where Caroline had been soft and gentle, Evelyn was all sharp edges and defensive walls. Caroline had never known true hardship. Evelyn had been forged in it. They were different in every way that mattered. And yet, when he'd seen Evelyn standing on that street corner, something in him had recognized something in her. Two people who'd been broken by life, who'd learned that hope was the most dangerous thing you could carry. Two people who were still fighting anyway. He thought about her pride, about the way she'd bristled at his help, even as she desperately needed it. He thought about her fierce love for Lily, the way she'd been willing to freeze rather than ask for help. He thought about her smile, rare and precious as diamonds, and the way it had made something in his chest twist with an emotion he was afraid to name. Careful, Henry, he told himself, swirling the whiskey. This is about helping someone in need, nothing more. But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. This was already about more than charity. This was about the way his empty house suddenly felt less empty, about how Mrs. Chen had hummed while preparing dinner for the first time in years, about the possibility that maybe being broken didn't mean being beyond repair, that maybe, with the right person, you could piece yourselves back together into something new. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in fresh white. Inside the house on the hill, 3 people slept. A baby recovering, a woman resting for the first time in months, and a man who was just beginning to understand that sometimes the life you save is your own. 3 weeks passed like a dream Evelyn was afraid to wake from. Lily thrived under Mrs. Chen's attentive care and regular medical checkups that Henry arranged without fanfare. The baby's cheeks filled out, her breathing grew strong and clear, and she began to smile, real smiles that lit up her entire face and made even serious Mrs. Chen dissolve into baby talk. Evelyn herself was transforming in ways she barely recognized. Regular meals put color back in her face. Sleep in a real bed erased the permanent exhaustion from her eyes. The constant knot of anxiety in her stomach slowly began to unwind, though she fought against it, afraid that relaxing her guard would invite disaster. She'd thrown herself into organizing Henry's library, partly to earn her keep and partly to avoid sitting still long enough to feel. The library was a 2-story masterpiece with rolling ladders and floor-to-ceiling shelves, filled with first editions and rare books that needed careful cataloguing. It was work that required attention to detail, quiet concentration, perfect for someone trying not to think about how much she was beginning to feel at home in a place that could never truly be hers. "You've made remarkable progress," Henry said one afternoon, finding her on the upper level with Lily napping in a bassinet nearby. He'd developed a habit of checking in on them throughout the day, usually with some excuse about needing a book or wanting Mrs. Chen's opinion on dinner. Evelyn looked down from her perch on the ladder, a leather-bound copy of Whitman's poetry in her hands. "I found your wife's collection, the books with her name written inside." Henry climbed the stairs to the upper level, his expression unreadable. "She loved poetry, used to read to me at night, said it would civilize me." He took the Whitman from Evelyn's hands, running his fingers over Caroline's careful signature. "I haven't been able to touch these since she died. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "No." Henry looked up at her, and she saw grief there, but also something gentler. "It's good. Someone should read them." Caroline would have hated them gathering dust out of misplaced sentiment. Evelyn descended the ladder, aware of the small space between them in the quiet library. "Tell me about her," she said softly, "if you want to." Henry was quiet for a long moment, then moved to the window overlooking the snow-covered garden. "She was sunshine. That's the only way I can describe it. Even when she was dying, she could find something to laugh about, some beauty to point out. She made me believe in goodness, in the idea that people were fundamentally worth caring about." "You still believe that?" Evelyn said. "You proved it when you stopped for me." "I wanted to believe it again," Henry corrected. "There's a difference." He turned to face her. "After Caroline died, I became convinced that caring was the problem, that if I just kept my distance from people, stayed focused on business, I couldn't be hurt again. It was a miserable way to live." "But safe," Evelyn said, understanding completely. "Yes, safe." He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "And then I found you on that street corner, and all my carefully constructed walls didn't mean a thing. I couldn't drive past, couldn't convince myself it wasn't my problem. Caroline's last gift to me, maybe, the inability to turn away from someone in need." Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, a crack in her own carefully constructed walls. "I'm glad you couldn't drive past. Even though I fought you every step of the way, you're still fighting," Henry observed. "I can see it. The way you tense up when Mrs. Chen brings you something, how you apologize for taking up space, the way you keep one eye on the door like you're planning your escape route. Can you blame me?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Every time I've trusted someone, every time I've let myself believe things might be okay, it's fallen apart. My parents, Jake, every friend who promised to help and then disappeared when things got hard. I learned to rely on myself because myself was all I had. And now?" Henry asked quietly. "Now I'm terrified," Evelyn admitted, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "I'm terrified of getting used to this, to safety and warmth and someone giving a damn whether I eat breakfast. I'm terrified of Lily getting attached to you and Mrs. Chen, of building a life here that I'll have to leave. Because I will have to leave, Henry. This isn't my world. I'm just visiting." "Why?" The question was simple but loaded with challenge. "Why does it have to be temporary? Why can't you just stay?" "Because I don't belong here." The words exploded out of her, weeks of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. "Look at me, Henry, really look. I'm a 23-year-old single mother with a high school education and a history of spectacularly bad decisions. I lived in my car. I was one bad day away from losing everything, including my daughter. You're a millionaire with a tech empire and a house that belongs in magazines. We exist in different universes. We exist right here, in this library, having this conversation," Henry said, moving closer. "You want to talk about bad decisions? I spent 3 years after Caroline died making money and avoiding life. I turned this house into a mausoleum and myself into a ghost. You think education and money make someone worthy? I know plenty of wealthy, educated people who are fundamentally empty. And I know a woman who fought like hell to save her child with nothing but fierce love and stubborn pride. Which one sounds more valuable to you?" Evelyn shook her head, feeling tears prick her eyes. "You don't understand. I understand that you're scared, that you've been hurt, that every instinct you have is screaming at you to run before this blows up in your face." Henry's voice was gentle but firm. "But I also understand that running means going back to that car, to that fear, to raising Lily in a world where one bad day could destroy everything. Is your pride really worth that?" "It's not about pride." The tears were falling now, hot and unstoppable. "It's about not being a burden, about not taking advantage of your kindness. About not letting myself believe in fairy tales where the rich guy falls for the poor girl and everything works out perfectly. That's not real life, Henry. Real life is messier and meaner, and it doesn't care about happy endings." From her bassinet, Lily began to fuss, picking up on her mother's distress. Evelyn moved to her automatically, lifting her daughter and pressing her face against Lily's soft head, using her baby as both comfort and shield. Henry watched them for a moment, then spoke quietly. "You're right. Real life is messy. It's painful and unpredictable, and it absolutely doesn't guarantee happy endings. I learned that watching my wife waste away, despite every resource I could throw at saving her. But you know what else real life is? Full of unexpected moments of grace, of strangers who stop when they should drive on, of connections that don't make sense on paper but feel right in your gut. Of second chances you didn't know you needed until they appeared." He took a careful step closer. "I'm not asking you to believe in fairy tales, Evelyn. I'm asking you to believe in possibility. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, you deserve more than survival. That Lily deserves a stable home. That I deserve a chance to be more than a lonely man in a big house. Is that really so impossible?" Evelyn looked at him through her tears. This man who'd disrupted her careful numbness, who'd offered kindness when she'd forgotten what it felt like, who was looking at her now like she was worth something beyond pity. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "How to accept help without feeling weak, how to trust without waiting for betrayal, how to let someone in when every experience has taught me that people leave." "Then we'll figure it out together," Henry said, messily, imperfectly, one day at a time. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, Evelyn. You just have to be willing to try." The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility and fear, and something neither of them was quite ready to name. Lily cooed softly, her tiny hand reaching out to grab at Evelyn's tear-dampened face, and the simple gesture of innocent trust broke something open in Evelyn's chest. "I'm not good at trying," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "Good thing I'm patient." Henry smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger, lighter. "And Mrs. Chen is persistent. Between the two of us, you don't stand a chance of keeping those walls up." Despite everything, Evelyn laughed, a watery, uncertain sound, but genuine. "You're both very annoying. We've been told." He held out his hand, not demanding, just offering. "What do you say? Willing to give this impossible situation a chance?" Evelyn looked at his hand, at the possibility it represented. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to pack up Lily and leave before she got in any deeper, before the inevitable abandonment could shatter her completely. But then she thought about Lily sleeping in a warm nursery instead of a cold car. about meals she didn't have to skip, about the way Henry looked at her, not with pity, but with respect, with something that might, given time, become more. She shifted Lily to one arm and placed her hand in Henry's. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, real. "One day at a time," she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "One day at a time," Henry confirmed. Neither of them moved to let go. Outside, winter continued its hold on Vermont, but inside the library, something new was beginning to grow. Not the desperate, consuming love of youth, but something slower, deeper, the kind of connection forged between two people who'd been broken by life and were learning, tentatively, to trust again. Mrs. Chen found them there an hour later, still talking quietly, while Lily played with her toes. The housekeeper said nothing, just smiled and returned to the kitchen to prepare dinner for 3, no, 4, counting the baby who was starting to eat solids, and hummed a tune she hadn't hummed since Caroline was alive. The house on the hill, so long silent, was coming back to life. Spring arrived in Millfield with the gentle insistence of life refusing to be denied. Snow melted into rushing streams, crocuses pushed through frozen ground, and the world transformed from monochrome to technicolor. In the 6 months since Henry had found Evelyn on that frozen street corner, everything had changed, and yet the most important transformations had nothing to do with seasons. Evelyn stood in the library, her library now, in every way that mattered, and surveyed the completed cataloguing project with quiet satisfaction. Every book had been documented, organized, and loved back into usefulness. The space that had been a shrine to loss had become something living again, a place where Henry read to Lily before bed, where Mrs. Chen practiced her English with classic novels, where Evelyn herself had discovered a passion for literature she'd never had time to explore before. "There you are," Henry appeared in the doorway, Lily bouncing happily in his arms. At 9 months old, she was all chubby cheeks and infectious giggles, completely healthy and thriving. Someone woke up from her nap asking for Mama. Evelyn's heart did that flip it always did when she saw them together. Henry, who'd claimed he didn't know anything about babies, was now an expert at raspberry sounds and peekaboo. Lily adored him completely, reaching for him whenever he entered a room, calling him Henry in her baby babble. "Come here, sweet girl." Evelyn took Lily and kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in that perfect baby smell. "Did you have good dreams?" "She dreamed about destroying my office, I think. That's her favorite activity these days." Henry's tone was affectionate rather than annoyed. He'd baby-proofed his study, installed gates on the stairs, and transformed his entire life around this small person who'd captured his heart. "She's gotten very good at pulling books off shelves. I blame her mother's influence." "I'm teaching her to love literature," Evelyn protested, but she was smiling. "It's important." Very educational, the way she tried to eat Pride and Prejudice last week. They'd fallen into this. Easy banter, shared parenting, a partnership that had grown so naturally that Evelyn sometimes forgot to be afraid of it. Almost. "Henry, we need to talk." The words came out more serious than she'd intended, and she saw concern flash across his face. "That sounds ominous." "It's not." "Well, it might be. I don't know." Evelyn set Lily down in her play area, where the baby immediately began investigating a set of colorful blocks. "I got a job offer today." Henry went very still. "A job offer?" "The elementary school," the principal called. "Apparently Mrs. Chen's been talking me up around town. They need a librarian's assistant, someone to help with the after-school reading program. It's part-time, flexible hours, and they're fine with me bringing Lily when needed." That's wonderful, Evelyn." Henry's voice was carefully neutral. "You'd be great at that." "I would," she agreed. "And the salary, combined with what I've saved from not paying rent here, would be enough for me to get my own place. Nothing fancy, but a real apartment. 2 bedrooms, so Lily could have her own room. There's a complex near the school with an opening next month." The silence that followed was heavy with everything unsaid. Henry moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tight with tension he was trying to hide. "You've been planning this," he said finally. "I've been thinking about it," Evelyn corrected. "About what comes next. About not overstaying my welcome. About standing on my own 2 feet again." Henry turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Is that really what this is about? Not overstaying your welcome? Or is this about running before you have to face what's happening between us?" "There's nothing happening between us." But the words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "Isn't there?" Henry crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Evelyn, I wake up every morning grateful that you're here. I spend my days looking for excuses to see you, to hear your laugh, to watch you with Lily. I've rearranged my entire life around your schedule, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Don't tell me there's nothing happening." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. "Henry, I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. "I'm in love with you, Evelyn. Not because you needed help, not out of pity or charity, but because you're brilliant and fierce and funny, and you make this house feel like a home again. Because watching you be a mother is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Because when I think about my future, you're in it. You and Lily both." Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes. "You don't mean that. You can't mean that." "Why can't I?" Henry's voice was gentle but determined. "Because you lived in your car 6 months ago. Because you didn't go to college. Because you think you're not good enough for someone like me." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "Evelyn, you saved me. When I found you on that street, I was just going through the motions of living. You gave me a reason to care again, to feel again, to believe that life could be more than just survival and loneliness." "That's gratitude," Evelyn whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. "Not love. It's both, and it's more than that." Henry's eyes searched hers. "I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt by everyone who was supposed to love you, but I'm not them, Evelyn. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to stop loving you when things get hard or complicated or messy. I'm here. I want to be here. The question is, do you?" Everything Evelyn had built, all her walls, all her defenses, all her careful plans to leave before she could be left, crumbled in the face of his honesty. She thought about the past 6 months, about how Henry had never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel less than whole, how he'd celebrated her victories and held her through her fears, how he'd become not just a benefactor, but a partner, a friend, and yes, if she was honest with herself, so much more. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "of trusting this, of believing it's real, of letting myself love you back and having it all fall apart." "So am I," Henry said, and the admission clearly cost him. "Loving someone means risking loss. I learned that with Caroline, but I also learned that the alternative, living without love to avoid pain, isn't living at all. It's just existing, and I don't want to just exist anymore, Evelyn. I want to live with you." "I don't come with just me," Evelyn said, last-ditch attempt at protecting her heart. "There's Lily. We're a package deal, and she'll always come first. I would never want it any other way." Henry glanced at Lily, who was watching them with wide eyes, blocks forgotten. "I love her too, not like she's yours, like she's ours, if you'll let her be." The word ours broke something open in Evelyn's chest. She thought about her daughter growing up here, in this beautiful house, with this good man, who'd already proven himself a father in every way that mattered. She thought about waking up every morning knowing she was loved, that Lily was safe, that home was no longer a place, but people. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, and realized that every single one of them was rooted in fear, not wisdom. "I love you too," she heard herself say, and watched Henry's face transform with joy. "I've loved you for months, and I've been fighting it because I didn't think I deserved it, didn't think it could be real." "It's real," Henry promised, pulling her close. "As real as anything I've ever felt." Their first kiss was tender and tentative, both of them handling each other like precious things that might break. When they pulled apart, Lily was clapping her hands and giggling as if she understood exactly what was happening. "Smart girl," Henry said, scooping up the baby and pulling Evelyn into a group embrace. She gets it from her mother. So what now? Evelyn asked, wrapped in the warmth of Henry's arms with her daughter between them. What do we do? Now we live, Henry said simply. We wake up together. We raise Lily together. We figure out the complicated parts as they come. And when you're ready, no pressure, no rush, we make this official. All of it. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. Are you proposing? Not yet, Henry said with a smile. When I propose, you'll know. There will be rose petals and possibly a string quartet. Mrs. Chen is already planning it. Of course she is. Evelyn laughed, imagining the housekeeper's delight. She's going to be impossible about this, isn't she? Completely impossible, Henry agreed cheerfully. She's already knitting baby booties for when we give Lily a sibling. The casual mention of more children, of a future together that stretched beyond tomorrow, should have terrified Evelyn. Instead, it filled her with a warmth that felt like coming home after a long journey through cold. I might still take that job, she said. Not because I need to leave, but because I want to. Because I want to contribute, to have my own thing. I think you should, Henry said immediately. You'd be amazing at it, and Lily would love being around other kids. And we'll need to figure out the living situation. I mean, I can't just keep living here like a guest. You're not a guest. You're family. Henry's voice was firm. But if it makes you feel better, we can figure out the details. Move you to the master suite, maybe. It has better closet space. Evelyn's cheeks heated. Henry, right. Are you suggesting I move into your bedroom? Eventually, he said with a grin that made him look boyish. After we do this properly. After I court you the way you deserve. After I convince you beyond all doubt that this is forever. You're ridiculous, Evelyn said, but she was smiling so hard her face hurt. I'm in love, Henry corrected. There's a difference. Mrs. Chen found them later in the library, all three of them on the floor with Lily's blocks, laughing at nothing in particular. The housekeeper took one look at their faces, at Henry's joy, at Evelyn's peace, at Lily's contentment, and smiled. About time, she muttered, heading back to the kitchen. I'll make something special for dinner. We're celebrating. As spring deepened into summer, Evelyn started her job at the elementary school and discovered a talent for connecting with children. Henry rearranged his schedule to work from home more often, transforming his study into a space where he could manage right technologies while still being present for his family. Lily took her first steps across the library floor, from Evelyn's arms into Henry's, and both of them cried happy tears. And on a perfect autumn evening, with the leaves turning gold and the air crisp with promise, Henry proposed in the garden where Caroline had once planted roses. He did it simply, without string quartets or rose petals, just him and Evelyn and Lily, who wore a tiny shirt that said, "Mama, say yes." Evelyn said yes, and meant it with every fibre of her being. They married in the spring, exactly 1 year after they'd met on that frozen street corner. It was a small ceremony in the garden, with Mrs. Chen crying happy tears, and Lily as flower girl. The town of Millfield turned out in force, no longer seeing Evelyn as the woman who'd lived in her car, but as one of their own, the librarian, Henry's fiancée, Lily's fierce and loving mother. In his vows, Henry promised to love her through all seasons, to be her home when the world felt cold, to choose her every single day. Evelyn promised to let him, to trust in their love, to believe in the possibility of happy endings. And in the years that followed, they built a life that honored both their pasts and their future. Henry established a foundation in Caroline's name to help single mothers in crisis, ensuring that no one would have to face what Evelyn had faced alone. Evelyn became the head librarian at the elementary school, touching countless young lives with her warmth and wisdom. Lily grew up surrounded by love, never knowing a world where she wasn't cherished completely. They had more children. A son named James, who had Henry's eyes and Evelyn's stubborn streak, and another daughter, Caroline, who seemed to carry the sunshine spirit of her namesake. The house on the hill filled with laughter and chaos, and the beautiful mess of a life fully lived. On cold winter mornings, when snow fell soft and silent over Millfield, Henry would sometimes find Evelyn at the window, staring out at the world with a distant expression. He'd wrap his arms around her from behind and ask what she was thinking. "I'm thinking about that morning," she'd say, "when you stopped, when you chose to see me, when the whole world looked away. How one moment of kindness changed everything. We changed each other," Henry would remind her, kissing her temple. "You saved me as much as I saved you." And Evelyn, who'd learned to believe in happy endings, in love that healed, in the possibility of home, would turn in his arms and smile. "No," she'd say, "we saved each other, and that, in the end, was the truest thing of all." The end.